What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, on this gross, rainy morning, it's why it's so dark in here, we are going to talk about guitar parts. The reason I want to talk about this is as we look at different guitars, okay, and we look at different costs of guitars, there's always this conversation, right? Is this guitar worth it? Is this really better than this one? Like that kind of stuff. Those conversations constantly go around, right? And so, and what something is worth to one person or makes a difference to one person might not or might make a difference to another person, right? So one person may say that a guitar in a particular price range is totally fine. And people will constantly, what's interesting is there's a couple of ways to go about it. One is you'll just reduce everything to the cost of parts and you'll just say, well, this guitar is made more cheaply, so therefore it only should cost this much. And they don't look at any of the manufacturing process or the manufacturing costs or anything like that. And then the other thing that happens is that people will say, well, this doesn't have anything to do with the tone, so therefore it doesn't matter. Which nobody's wrong, right? Because we're all trying to make a decision on what we want to purchase and the guitars we want to play. So let me give you a couple of examples here, and then we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit. All right, so I've got a few guitars hanging up here. We've got a Sterling Music Man bass over there that's $299, right? We've got this PRS Fiore, what is that thing, 2,700 bucks? This one is this silver, this is a good example. So this is $599, and people are like, well, it's just a Squire with a Hello Kitty on it. It shouldn't be that expensive, etc. That's an example. We've got a Gibson there. I think those were like $1,300 when they came out. They probably would be more now because it was a few years ago. Then this is a custom built guitar. So what's worth it when it comes to custom built stuff? In fact, we've got another custom one over there. And then we've got this American Vintage 2 Telecaster in between. So when we start going along and looking at all these, we start looking at the various manufacturing, processes, and we look at the various parts. And a lot of people will say, well, this one and this one function very similarly. Not really, but you don't understand what I'm saying. So why is that one 600 bucks and that one is 2,700 bucks? So let's dive into this. You're looking at some of the inventory that we use to make pickups around here. And not only pickups, but also a lot of our loaded pick guards, so there's pots up here, there's switches, we've got jacks, we've got all this kind of stuff. And I just got a whole shipment of stuff in here. And I thought what we would do is we would go through some of these parts, and I want to just kind of show you what quality parts look like, and we can kind of talk about comparisons of what comes in less expensive guitars. What I'm hoping is that by this conversation, you will be better educated about what's in various guitars at various different price points, and then you can make an educated decision. It doesn't matter to me, and it doesn't matter to you what I like. We all just want to play guitar, but I would like for you to be more educated on what is inside your guitar, and then you can decide, does that matter to me? Let's just jump straight in. Let's start talking about pots, because that's the first thing I gotta get out of here. These are CTS 500K pots. Now, when you look at a potentiometer, it could be the ones that come in inexpensive guitars are fine. They work, right? Now, what you're gonna pay for when you pay for a good pot, okay? So this is probably I don't want to say as high end as they get, because Dunlop makes some crazy ones that are 22 bucks a piece and whatever. But in OEM guitars that are high quality, you're going to have CTS pots. And what you get are a couple of things. One is you get longevity. The materials that make up the carbon races in here that make the little resistance tracks are higher quality. They're longer wearing. The wiper design, so there's like a little copper leg that goes around in here that basically, tells you where the knob is inside. They're higher quality, and they last a lot longer. And then the other thing is the taper. So if you've ever played an inexpensive guitar and you go to turn the volume down and you turn it up a little bit, and it doesn't really do a whole lot, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of on, and then you know, you turn it down, it doesn't really do a whole lot, the volume just gets a little lower, and then it just kind of like shuts off. That's because the taper of the carbon inside here is inconsistent. And so when you pay a little more, and we're talking, what are these? I think on our website, these might be $6, $5. So they're not super expensive, but you get a better taper. One thing I should mention is that when you upgrade to better pots, you'll probably have to go to a 3/8 hole instead of a 7mm hole. So you might have to ream out your holes in your pick guard or whatever if you've got an import guitar, because the standard size pots are 3/8 of an inch instead of 7mm, which is a little bit bigger. You will feel a difference. The other thing too is our pots that we use. Now, it depends where you buy them, but the tolerances can be a lot. So let's say this is a 500K pot. Less expensive pots could be 30 or 40% out of tolerance. These are within 10%. So that means that your tone is going to be more consistent across everything. All right, let's talk caps, because caps is a big one, because people make a big deal about capacitors. And, you know, a lot of times people will say, well, caps don't really matter, or caps really do matter, etc. We won't get into really the science of it today, but there's a couple of things I just want to talk about as far as capacitors go. These are actual Sprague orange drop caps. Now, the ones that come in your inexpensive guitars are going to work fine. They are capacitors, right? They all do the same job. We could get into the science of the dielectric efficiency of the material, from paper and oil to paper and mylar, or oil and mylar to mica to polyurethane to whatever. We could get into all of that. But the bottom line is the cap is going to make your guitar, is going to make your tone circuit work, okay? What we're really concerned with here, more than anything, more than the material, more than anything, is the value of the cap. So this is a 33 microfarad, so you're going to have, usually, you're going to have a 15, a 22, a 33, or a 47. Those are the ones we sell on our website. And then the other thing that you got to be really concerned with here is, where is it? So there's 333J right here on this capacitor. The first three numbers are the value of the capacitor, so this is 33. But that J right there is the tolerance, is the that is the margin of error for the cap. So it's an alphabetical thing. So A is the lowest tolerance, and it goes way up. So these are 5%, I believe. Maybe they're 10%. I'll put it on the screen. I'll show you the chart. But when you buy cheap ones off of Amazon, you get those little variety packs. A lot of times they'll be K or M, and those could be 10, 20, 30% off of their actual value. And so making sure that the value is consistent with what we're talking about here is a thing. Also, orange drop caps are pretty durable when it comes to heat and stuff. So a lot of folks worry about, you know, burning up a capacitor when they're soldering it into their guitar or etc. These are actually super easy to deal with. You don't have to worry so much about melting them, where with a paper and oil cap, you do. Two more things electronics wise, and then we'll get into some hardware. Jacks. So these are pure tone jacks, and these are the thing about pure tone jacks is a little interesting, is they've got 4 prongs on them, and so they really hold the jack in. Now that is not typical. We also have the normal switchcraft jack too, right? So even with just a regular switchcraft jack, these are not very expensive. But what happens is, with a cheaper one, is this right here is a lot more flexible. And the design of this end right here, a lot of times in the less expensive guitars, will make it to where this flexes and doesn't hold tension against the plug, the cable, as tightly as it should. And over time, this will lose springiness, and then we'll lose contact, and we'll give you that kind of crunchiness, that, you know, crackliness. because what you're really trying to do here, I don't know if people realize this or not, but what you're really trying to do is keep tension against this so that the cable gets pushed against the barrel as hard as possible, because that's where the ground for the entire guitar is, and that's really the biggest problem. It will most of the time make contact here, but we needed enough tension to push against the side of the barrel. And so those cheap ones don't do that as well. Or, well, they'll do it fine, but then over time of use, they'll kind of wear out. This one solves that problem because it's got fingers on all four sides. So you'll have your positive ones. You'll have actually two for your positive, which is the tip, and then you'll have two for the sleeve in here, and so they're a little bit better. You don't have to buy these. You can just buy the normal Switchcraft ones. In fact, you don't have to buy any of them if you don't want. You can just leave the same one in your guitar until it fails and then just replace it. But again, when we're talking about quality instruments versus less expensive instruments, this is going to be another difference. And then the last thing on the electronics side of things that we're going to talk about as far as the switch gear is switches. You have seen, and I'll throw a picture up on the screen, you have seen the square box switch that comes in most inexpensive guitars. They're fine, and a lot of sometimes they're necessary based on the thickness of the body of the guitar. Whoops, apparently I didn't have that in the thing good enough. So very thin guitars, I believe this is just over an inch thick. And so we need that much space in the cavity for this. It will fit in most guitars. This is an Oak Grigsby electro switch, and this switch has more positive, basically it has more positive contact, and it wears a lot longer than what you have in those box switches with the solder tabs on the top. Those are basically like a printed circuit board, and you can see here that these have actual kind of crimped fingers that will keep you going for a lot longer. I mean, basically the bottom line is these will last a lot longer, and they'll be a better feel on the top of the guitar because they'll actually have a more sure kind of click to them. The detent is better. And then the other thing is, like I said, the wear. Now, the only caution I would give you if you're putting these into your guitar for the first time is that when you're soldering your cables onto the tabs here, you don't want to let too much solder drip down in here, because if it drips down in here, then it can get stuck in this little spot right here, and it'll actually freeze up your switch and ruin your switch. So just be careful of that. Just make sure you use just enough solder to fill up this top little eyelet. Let's see, I think that's it for the switch gear on the guitar. Now let's talk a little bit about some hardware quality differences. All right, so we're gonna go over some other basic hardware. There's a couple things here. These are screws that we use to put neck pickups into Telecasters. So these are like the like legit 50s kind of reissue ones. And then these are screws to adjust your pickups, like on a Strat or a Tele Bridge pickup. The quality of these can range greatly, and so if you have an inexpensive guitar, just be careful when you're adjusting everything that you use a properly sized screwdriver and the right tools. You know, the right thickness of a flathead if it's a flathead, the right number, 1, 2, or 3 of a Phillips screwdriver, to make sure, because with inexpensive hardware you can really goof it up quick. And so I call it Swiss cheese hardware because that's what happens. It just kind of cheeses apart. So make sure you use good hardware. And if you, like when of course, if you buy pickups from us, you're going to get good quality hardware with it. And so just think about those things. And that's again, that's another thing that you're going to pay for when you buy a more expensive guitar. In most cases, a higher quality guitar, let's call it. Here's a couple other things that are probably a little less, I don't want to say less important, but whatever, who cares about springs? But these are good ones. They work good. We've been using them for a long time. So these are the ones for the humbucker. These are the ones for the single coils. I do like to clip about a 1/2 inch off of mine when I use them, so I don't have to fight them so hard. That's what I do when I build my own stuff. There you go with that. And then here's a couple other kinds of screws. These are P90 mounting screws. P90 mounting screws and Jazzmaster cover mounting screws and these can actually be used for like P bass and jazz bass covers. These, well, here, let me show you. The type of head that comes on them so that they fit in the cover correctly is really small. And so on cheap ones, you really have to be careful with this screw head. So just make sure that, well, I'm not going to say just make sure, but this is another thing that you can kind of run into with less expensive guitars. This stuff is actually really good. And then of course here is our humbucker mounting screws. And again, same thing, just the quality of the metallurgy in nicer guitars is going to be better, and it's going to make it to where you don't strip out screws as easy. So one of the things that we do here is we make Telecaster drop-in control plate sets. And one of the things that you will see on less expensive Telecaster copies is a really thin, super cheap piece of metal. The chrome plating won't be as good. It might actually flake on the back. You know, that type of thing. And like, for example, this one has countersinks if you wanted to use countersink screws, or if you wanted to use flat screws to put them in, it doesn't matter. And these actually already have, like we talked about earlier, the 3/8 inch holes for the better quality pots. This is something obviously has nothing to do with tone, right? The last few things we were talking about hardware-wise have nothing to do with tone, but I just kind of want to show you some of where the money goes when we talk about hardware. Here's another thing. They're all in paper, but these are knobs. So this is actually a 3/8 inch shaft brass knob. I like using brass. This is chrome plated brass. I like using a brass knob because it's heavy. It feels nice. When you put it on top of the pot, you screw it all down, everything works properly. It feels really nice, and the detent of the knob, well, there's no detent, I guess, but the resistance of the knob feels really nice. It works really perfect. And so when we do our Telecaster drop-in kits, those are the knobs that we use. Again, this stuff, people are gonna be like, well, that has nothing to do with the tone. That has nothing to, you're right, it has nothing to do with the tone. Like what kind of springs, what kind of switch tips, what kind of screws. These are pickup screws. We're not gonna talk about those today. But this kind of thing, I agree, has nothing to do with the tone. However, if you look at that hardware and you look at your guitar and you say, well, that's okay, it doesn't make any difference to me. That's totally fine. I just want you to know what's in there, right? So when you look in your guitar, let's say it's a less expensive guitar, and you look in there and you're like, yeah, my stuff's different. A couple of things you might want to ask yourself is it working? Yes. Does it affect the tone of the guitar at all? So the things that we talked about today would be pot value and tolerance, pot taper, and capacitor value and capacitor tolerance. So those kinds of things would really affect the tone of the guitar. Now the question is, do you like how your guitar sounds already? If you do, then there's no sense in worrying about it. Some of the other things to involve your brain there would be wear, right? So if you wear the part out, then it probably is cool to upgrade it to something better. Or if you're gonna go in there and put new pickups in, for example, maybe do it all at the same time, right? That kind of thing. Do you have to do any of it? No. If you like your guitar the way it is, and you enjoy what's in there now, and you like everything, then there's no sense in doing any of it. But just understand that a more expensive guitar, a lot of times, a higher quality instrument is going to come with different stuff than a less expensive, lower quality, more entry-level instrument, which is totally fine. They obviously both function. The other things that can affect more, and so like this stuff that doesn't affect any tone, like the hardware and everything, it just costs more. It's nicer, It will last longer. It is kind of subjectively better, I guess, if you care about it. But if you care about it, then you care about it. If you don't, you don't. No big deal, right? Makes no difference to another person. Just I like it. I like the quality hardware. I think it's cool. So am I willing to pay for it? Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to do this in the same video because I think there's more involved here, but there's some other stuff hardware-wise that really can affect the tone, but not always, and we can talk about that. That would be, so these are pickup pull pieces, the actually screws that go into a humbucker, the ones that you see. These are pickup covers. The quality of the pickup cover can make a difference. What about some of the other stuff? What about the wire that hooks it up? What about the base plates on a Telecaster bridge pickup? What about the base plates on a humbucker? Can all that stuff? What about the base plates on a Strat pickup? What about all that stuff? Can that affect the tone? Does that really matter? Does the quality of the parts in your guitar really matter when it comes to the pickup side? It's a whole kind of ball of wax in itself, so I didn't want to lump it together with this, but maybe we'll do that in our next video. But for this one, when you look at a $300, a $500 guitar versus a $3,000 guitar, just understand that there are going to be differences in hardware. Now there's other stuff too. There's going to be the quality of the frets, and I don't mean like the fretwork, but I mean the actual like the quality of the metal in the frets, the quality of the metal in the bridge, the quality of the nut, the quality of the tuners, like all those kinds of things. I don't deal as much with those like in my business, like at Dylan Talks Tone. We don't deal with that stuff as much, so I don't have a lot of those parts around to show you. But so, you know, I deal obviously more on the electronic side of it, so that's why we could really dive into this stuff more. But all of those things kind of matter. Like we're not even talking about wood, we're not even talking about fancy stuff like inlays and all that. Just the quality of the metallurgy of the parts and all that. I guess the question is, at the end of this conversation, before we get into the pickup stuff in our next video, how much of any of this does it matter to you? Do you personally care? And this is a personal opinion for each of us. How much do you care about how thick your Telecaster control plate is, the quality of the hardware? How much do you care about the quality of the pots in your guitar? How much do you care about the quality of the capacitor? How much do you care about the quality of the switch? How much do you personally care about the quality of the pickup screws that hold the pickups in and the springs and all that kind of stuff? Are you a kind of person who like really enjoys this hobby and wants like the coolest stuff? Or, you know, are you totally fine with whatever? In any of these areas, because different areas might be different importance to people, right? I'm curious to know what you think in the comments, because this is an interesting conversation. I don't want to make this a expensive versus cheap. I want to make this what's important to you, right? Like, what do you think is important about your own guitar for yourself, and what are you going to put the work and time and effort and money into for yourself? Let me know. Thanks for hanging out. This has been super fun. You can get all this stuff on our website, Dylan Talks Tone. Make sure you go and check it out. You can obviously get pickups, you can get wiring, you can get Telecaster switches, you can get loaded pick guards, you can get all this stuff. We sell all this stuff here at Dylan Talks Tone. So go and check it out if that's something that you're into. If not, that's okay. We'll just see you in the next video. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll talk to you soon.